Most people think the U.S. is just sending money to Ukraine. They see headlines about aid packages, tens of billions of dollars, and assume it's simply foreign assistance. They hear about Greenland and think it's random geopolitics. On the surface, none of this looks connected. But that's the surface story. What's actually happening is a restructuring of power around three pillars: energy, critical minerals, industrial capacity. For 3 decades after the Cold War, globalization prioritized efficiency. Supply chains stretched across continents. Energy flowed cheaply. Manufacturing concentrated where labor was lowest cost. Rare earth processing became heavily concentrated in China, which today handles roughly 80 to 90% of global rare earth refining. That system was efficient, but it wasn't resilient. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, Europe was importing roughly 40% of its natural gas from Russia. That level of dependency isn't just economic. It's strategic leverage. And once that vulnerability was exposed, behavior changed. The energy realignment. After the invasion, Europe rapidly reduced Russian gas imports. Who filled the gap? The United States. U.S. LNG exports to Europe more than doubled between 2021 and 2023. New export terminals were approved. Long-term supply contracts, often 15 to 20 years in length, were signed. That's not a short-term trade. That's a structural energy pivot. Energy security became national security. And energy infrastructure is capital-intensive, meaning once it's built, it tends to generate long-duration revenue streams. This is what a realignment looks like. Now zoom out further. Modern economies run on materials most people never think about. Lithium demand is projected to grow several-fold by 2030 due to electric vehicle adoption. Rare earth elements are essential for precision-guided weapons, wind turbines, smartphones, and advanced semiconductors. China currently dominates global rare earth processing capacity. That concentration creates systemic risk. So when policymakers talk about Ukraine's deposits of lithium, titanium, and graphite, or Greenland's rare earth reserves, they are talking about diversifying supply chains. Not because it's convenient. Because concentration risk is dangerous. Resilience becomes policy. And policy shapes capital flows. Support for Ukraine isn't just weapons leaving warehouses. It's weapons being replaced. The U.S. defense budget has risen above $800 billion annually. European NATO members have also increased spending, with many targeting 2% of GDP or higher. Factories are expanding. Ammunition production lines are scaling. Drone development has accelerated dramatically. Industrial capacity, once allowed to shrink in peacetime, is being rebuilt. That rebuild takes years. Which means demand isn't momentary. It's structural. Greenland sounds remote. But geographically, it sits between North America and Europe in the Arctic corridor, a region becoming more accessible as ice coverage declines. Beyond location, it holds deposits of rare earth elements and other strategic minerals. Developing them is expensive and environmentally complex. But even partial diversification reduces supply concentration. And in strategic industries, partial diversification can be enough to reduce leverage. Greenland isn't about expansion. It's about optionality. And optionality has value in uncertain systems. When governments pivot at this scale, certain sectors gain long-term visibility. Defense manufacturers, LNG exporters and infrastructure firms, engineering and industrial equipment companies, mineral exploration and processing firms, grid and energy modernization providers. These aren't short-term spikes. They're multi-year investment themes driven by policy. And policy-backed demand is among the most durable forms of demand in markets. There are real risks. Mining projects take years to permit and finance. Commodity prices fluctuate. Peace negotiations could slow defense growth. Environmental opposition can delay Arctic development. But structural shifts tend to outlast political cycles. The broader direction is clear. Efficiency is no longer the only priority. Resilience is. Redundancy is. Strategic independence is. That's a philosophical change in economic policy. And philosophical changes shape decades. The bigger awakening. For most of the past 30 years, investors could ignore geopolitics. Markets were driven primarily by interest rates, earnings, and innovation cycles. Now geopolitics is feeding directly into industrial policy, energy markets, and supply chains. If you only watch headlines, you'll see conflict. If you step back, you'll see capital reallocation. The real shift isn't just the war. It's the redesign of economic architecture underneath it. And economic consciousness begins when you stop reacting to events and start recognizing the systems forming beneath them.